Welcome to the Visual Bible Studies channel. In this rather short study, we're going to look at a verse that calls to mind some things about ministry in Christ that we sometimes give into. That is, getting discouraged and feeling that we're not getting anywhere, or somehow we're just too exhausted to continue. We look at the concept of not losing heart. And in my studies, I've noticed that Paul says this a number of times, but in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, the first verse of the chapter, he says this: "Therefore, since we have this ministry, as we received mercy, we do not lose heart." Here, the word ministry doesn't necessarily refer to someone who is a quote-unquote minister, who has a degree or has been ordained. The word is diakonia, and that is the basis for our word deacon, or one who serves, a servant. So ministry is really one who serves for the cause of Christ and serves others. So it's not something very specific. It's much more broad when we talk about ministry. We all are ministers in a real sense. So Paul says this: since we have this ministry, this service to others, as we receive mercy, we do not lose heart. And it's an interesting verb that is brought to mind by Paul. And I thought about this, and I said, I think there are other verses that Paul uses that phrase, do not lose heart. And I found one in Galatians 6:9. The verb is the same, but it's in a slightly different form. So I made note of that and looked for another verse that Paul might have used this same concept of not losing heart. And I found it in 2 Thessalonians 3:13. Although it is translated a little differently, it's the same verb, again, different form. I thought about it as I looked at these three verses, and I thought, well, this is what's interesting, is that Galatians was written pretty much in relationship to his first missionary journey, a letter to the Galatian churches. And then 2 Thessalonians is written in relationship to his second missionary journey. And guess what? The verse in 2 Corinthians is related to and written toward the end of his third missionary journey. So we see this phrase, do not lose heart, in all three missionary journeys to the different churches he writes to. So in his first missionary journey, he says, do not lose heart, let us not lose heart. And he uses the present subjunctive form. The subjunctive is the mood of probability, shows a certain amount of uncertainty, but it's probable. That means it's probable you will lose heart. And yet he negates that response to service and ministry with the negative particle may. Do not, let us not lose heart. In his second missionary journey, he addresses the Thessalonians and exhorts them, again, not to lose heart or not grow weary in doing good. Again, uses the subjunctive, meaning it's certainly possible and probable that you will grow weary, but don't. And I think there are times when it is easy to do that. Paul's experience, though, is growing, and he looks at this concept of losing heart as something that will generally happen. His experience is growing. He's thinking, yes, it's been tough. We've been ministering, but there are times when it's definitely probable that you will lose heart. So we see that used twice in these two letters. But then when he comes to our passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, when he says we do not lose heart, he has gone through a lot more ministry, a lot more opportunities, but also a lot more opposition and persecution. He has been physically abused, and there are times when he's chased out of town. And Judaizers have come behind him and try to mess up his work and subvert that which he has been trying to build into these new churches. And so now he uses the indicative mood. The indicative mood is the mood of certainty. He says, at this point, I look back on my ministry and I am not just thinking there's a probability of you becoming faint-hearted, but he says it is a surety that sometime in service to others and service to the Lord, you are going to lose heart. There's no doubt about it. And then he uses another negative particle, but it's different. It's not as, the may is more mild, and we see that used twice in both Galatians and 2 Thessalonians. But when he comes to 2 Corinthians and the things that he has gone through, it seems like he says, okay, I know you're going to lose heart. And it's just something that will happen anytime you're in ministry. It's a fact. It's certain. But I want you not to lose heart. And he uses the negative particle uk, which is a particle of summary negation, much more emphatic than the other two, the other particle he uses in the other two verses. So I believe that in the development of Paul, as he experiences ministry, his understanding of the things that can bring a servant down, to grow weary, to lose heart, becomes something that he says, I'm now certain there are going to be times you will indeed lose heart, but don't let that happen. Do not lose heart. Continue on, and God will reward. I think if you've been in ministry and service to others for any number of years, you will find that this is going to be true, that you will have to go back to these verses and say, okay, I think I need to be encouraged. I need to stand firm. I should not give up, not get faint-hearted, and I will continue serving the Lord. I'm not going to give up. And I think that's the message. Sometimes it's interesting to just see how the words are used by the apostle to exhort, and we also see within the apostle's life the development of this certainty that this unfortunate situation does occur and will occur. But he says even more strongly in 2 Corinthians, don't lose heart. Well, thank you for watching, and pray that you will be able to like and comment.